Hello, King Kong fans. Welcome to my review of the 1933 original King Kong film. Last time during our summer special, we tackled the first episode of season 1 of Treadstone, and I also had a movie review of The Invincible Iron Man. So I hope you guys did enjoy those products. But as I've said, in those videos, that I'm going to be also tackling the King Kong movies. And where better to start than where it all began with the original 1933 King Kong movie. And that's what I'll be covering today, the 1933 King Kong film. And this film was released on April 7th, 1933. There were some releases in different states in the United States during March, but according to most sources, the official release date worldwide, statewide in the U.S. was April 7, 1933. So, the short synopsis of the film, for those who aren't aware of it, of the original King Kong, is actress Ann Darrow and director Carl Denham travel to the Indian Ocean to do location shoots for Denham's new jungle picture. However, along the way, the actress Ann Darrow meets and falls for rugged first mate Jack Driscoll. Upon arriving at a mysterious island, Anne is taken hostage by natives who prepare her as a sacrifice to the enormous ape Kong, who rules over their jungle. But when Anne is rescued and Kong is captured, the real trouble begins. So, I'm going to be covering this movie from the 2-disc special feature edition, for those who aren't aware of it. This is what it is. This is the first film I'm going to tackle on DVD, and, I've mostly been doing streaming, but I wanted to, also, but I was so curious about interesting special features and, all that, so I got the DVD, and I'm actually real excited to not only talk about the movie itself, but the amount of special features in it. I definitely recommend getting this DVD, as I'll talk more about the special features during my review, and certain stuff that I found interesting. But I definitely recommend you guys should get the 2-disc special feature. It's a really cool experience and is worth getting. But this movie by King Kong fans is considered classic and masterpiece. Now, I've talked, like I said, now if you guys remember, I have covered King Kong on my channel before. You guys know I'm a massive Godzilla fan, and the third movie in Godzilla's franchise, as well as Kong's, was King Kong vs. Godzilla. So, I mentioned how King Kong was my second favorite monster. And I did tell you guys that one day I was going to tackle the King Kong movies. Well, this is the beginning of that. I'm going to try and tackle most of them, hopefully. I might get a few, but not all. Just like the Treadstone TV show. But I'm really excited to review each of the King Kong movies. It's been a while, and, this will be interesting because I want to see whether agree with King Kong fans, whether this is a good, really classic masterpiece of a King Kong movie, or whether it's, the opposite, and, it's not so good. But we're going to delve deep into that, and I'm going to talk about the film, the special features, all in detail during the review. So sit back and enjoy and let's take a look at the movie to see whether I think it is a good or bad King Kong movie. The film begins with Carl Denham, a film director who is famous for shooting animal pictures in remote and exotic locations. Denham is unable to hire an actress to star in his newest project. This is due to the appeal of female co-stars in romance in the 1930s. So he he decides to wander the streets, basically searching for a suitable girl for his next film. While going on the streets searching, he finds an unemployed Ann Darrow, who is caught trying to steal an apple from a grocer. But the grocer catches her, chastises her, tells her that he saw what she was doing. But Denham decides to pay off the grocer after seeing Ann's looks, and realizes he's found his girl. So he then buys Ann a meal at a nearby restaurant, and he offers her the lead role in his newest picture that he's going to film. And even though Anne is apprehensive about doing it, she really has nothing to lose due to her current situation, and so she eagerly agrees. And so with that, we begin our adventure, and they set sail aboard the Venture, which is an old, tramp steamer that travels for weeks in the direction of Indonesia, where Denham claims that they'll be shooting a lot of their film. Despite his ongoing declarations that women have no place on board ships, the ship's first mate, Jack Driscoll, is obviously becoming, attracted to Anne as the adventure goes along. In the beginning, he's not too fond of it because she's a woman, and is on board with a bunch of males, and he's kind of like that cold, tough-hearted dude. But he grows on with her. He begins to fall in love with her. And Denham, obviously isn't an idiot, and he takes notes of the situation after Driscoll and Anne are talking, and he informs Jack that he's already has enough trouble on his hands without the complication of a love affair between his actress and one of his first the first mate of the ship. Driscoll kind of sneers at the suggestion. He's like, whatever, Denham, you're wrong. You're delusional. You're not. I haven't fallen in love with her. He basically just writes it off, reminding Denham of his toughness and past adventures. So obviously Denham and Jack have been on adventures before. Not surprising considering Jack is very close. Denham is close with Captain Inglehorn, who will mention a bit later. But Denham replies by outlining the theme of both the movie he's making and the one in which his main character in the film is like. This is what he tells Jack about the themes of his film and the character that that Jack is reminding him of.
A beast was a tough guy too. He could lick the world. But when he saw beauty, she got him. He went soft. He forgot his wisdom, and the little fellas licked him.
So after this, Denham finally tells Driscoll and Captain Inglehorn about where he wants to go, because he's basically been maintaining the secrecy of what their trip is going to be, where they're going to be shooting for this film. And he says that they're searching for an uncharted island. Denham says that the skipper of a freighter gave him the only map that shows that its location, which is Skull Island, and he had received it in turn from a native of the island who had been swept out to sea. Denham then goes on in a pretty awesome moment, I must say. He then describes something monstrous connected to the island, a legendary entity known to the islanders as Kong. And this is something really great because it adds to the fantasy element of the film. You really every island, every part of the world always has its legends and its fantasies. So it's really cool that that Skull Island, this unknown place, is inhabited by something we may not like a legend that we might not know of, and obviously Denham is fascinated by that legend and wants to be the one to capture it, which makes sense. A lot of people, when they are interested in something, they want to capture that legend, that fantasy. So after that awesome and fantastic scene, the Venture creeps through the fog surrounding the island, and the crew can hear drums in the distance. And finally arriving at the island shore, they see a native village perched on the peninsula. It's cut off from the bulk of the island by an enormous wall. A landing party, including the filmmaker, obviously Carl Denham, and his leading lady, Ann Darrow, goes ashore and encounters the natives, who are about to hand over a girl to Kong as a ritual sacrifice. Obviously Jack also goes because he's not gonna, because he has feelings for Ann, so he's not gonna trust Carl and Englehorn to do this alone. And when they notice this, Denham begins filming, and although Denham, Englehorn, Jack, and Ann are all hiding behind the foliage when they're filming the natives doing their ritual, the native chief eventually spots them and approaches the troop. So now that they've been caught, Denham just tells everyone to get to show themselves because there's no use, trying to run away or keep hiding. So Captain Englehorn, who surprisingly can understand the native speech, which is really convenient and good for both Denham and for the rest of the crew, at Denham's urging, makes friendly overtures to the chief. So basically, Denham's trying to get Englehorn to tell the natives, specifically the chief, that they mean no harm. They're not trying to intrude upon them. They just want, they're here as friends, basically. When the native chief gets a good look at Ann, he begins speaking with very good energy. And they're wondering why he's so fascinating with Ann, and Englehorn translates what the chief says, which is...
He says, look at the golden woman. Yeah, blondes are scarce around here.
So the chief offers a proposition to Englehorn and all of them to swap 6 native women for Ann. An offer that Denham obviously declines because he's not giving up his leading lady, and he's not that much of a heartless bastard. And he and his party edge away from the scene, assuring the chief that they'll return tomorrow to get better acquainted with each other. So with that, we cut back onto the Venture, where Jack and Ann are openly expressing their love for each other. And when Jack is called away to the captain's quarters, a stealthy amount of natives who get a boat and row to the Venture capture Ann. Despite them being denied Ann, they're those type of group. They just take Ann for themselves, whether they get a yes or no. And they take her back to the wall and present her to Kong in an elaborate ceremony. And Kong emerges from the jungle when the ceremony has begun, and he's revealed to be a giant gorilla. And I must say, Kong looks really good in this movie. The way they were able to, make... they really talk about in the other special features how they made Kong, and Willis O'Brien did a really good job with Kong's features, with the way he moves, and just how he looks. He looks really good in this movie, and that's really something important considering Kong is our main star, and so we need to. He can't be looking like an idiot, like goofy or not serious. He's got to be a menacing and threatening monster, but also one that we can relate to, because obviously that's what this film was trying to convey. And Willis O'Brien does that fantastically. So the Venture crew returns to the village because they notice, the lights in the distance, and they realize Anne's not on the ship. They can't find her, so they go back to the village, and they take control of the wall. And half of the crew go after Kong, while the other half stay behind. And they encounter two different creatures. They encountered an enraged Stegosaurus, who comes charging after them. And I mean, holy shit! Like, Denham just fucking throws a bomb right at them, and he came out of nowhere. Like it was just calm, and then it sprinted at them. I was like, holy fuck! And thankfully Denham killed that bastard, and they did a nice job with showing the full view of his dead body. And then there's also a territorial Apatosaurus who comes out of the water, and holy shit is this creature like something else. Because it literally, as soon as the crew all get knocked back, not only does it kill some of the people in the water, but then just when you think in the next scene all the guys are running away, even though there's one guy that's fallen behind, the guy climbs up a tree, and holy shit, it's right there, and then it eats it. This is horrifying. This is scary. It's terrifying, but it's so good, what makes it such a amazing scene. I mean, this is fucking terrifying for a crew to go through. This is more than they thought they would be handling. And up ahead in a jungle clearing, Kong places Anne in a high cleft of a dead upright tree, and then he goes back and confronts his pursuers as they're walking along the top of an enormous fallen tree trunk over a deep ravine. And I mean, holy shit, does King Kong just not give a fuck in this movie? Because not only does the other monsters not give a shit about these guys and keep killing them, Kong really is fucking enraged. Dude does not want anybody to get near his lady. He's that thirsty. Holy shit, this dude is this is the most savage I think I've ever seen Kong. And Kong shakes all of them off into the ravine with only Driscoll and Denham escaping. And I gotta tell you, this is not only is this a terrifying scene, but I don't know if this is a bad thing to admit, but it's kind of an entertaining and funny scene, because the way the screams are terrifying, obviously, but just the way they screamed in the movie when they all fell into the ravine, I couldn't stop laughing because it was it was entertaining. I didn't expect I just wasn't expecting I don't know if it was the acting or something, but it just was funny how savage Kong was and how these sailors were dropping like flies. It's just an incredible scene, and one that is probably one of my favorite scenes in the film. So after that terrifying and funny and entertaining scene, um, because Denham's on the other one side and Jack is on the other, Jack decides he's going to pursue alone and not let Carl, try and get himself killed too. So Denham decides to go back with the others to the door, to the wall, and Jack is going to pursue and get Anne back. So Jack, who grabbed some of the vines, uh, went down, like basically like how I showed in the scene. He went down rather than on the log, which was why he was the only one left alive, and ascended the chasm. And he, like I said, he continues the chase while Denham returns to the village. And while this is happening, a T-Rex approaches Anne, who's pretty terrified, and she screams, which alerts Kong, because if there's one thing that'll keep Kong's attention is a screaming woman. And he rushes back and confronts the T-Rex, and there's a violent fight between the two titans, which is actually not a really good scene by Willis O'Brien. And I heard this took about it took like I think 7 weeks, if I remember correctly, to do this scene, which is incredible because you wouldn't think it would take that long to do this fight. But back then, stop motion was really not an easy thing to just. It wasn't something quick you could do. It took a lot of time and effort. So that's why I applaud Willis O'Brien and the rest of the visual effects crew for what they did. And Kong ends the fight by prying open the T-Rex's jaw until it breaks. And I gotta say, this was a pretty funny scene because it was so unexpected, and I'm like, as soon as he kills the T-Rex, then he just then something else happens, and I'm like, Kong, what the hell are you doing? Like, he's just playing with the jaw as it's broken, like a little kid, and it's so funny. Like, it's something that you wouldn't, it's just so out of, that's what makes, Kong so great, is Willis O'Brien, just, did that for, a little personality to give for Kong's character. So that's why it was so good, because it was just so unexpected. You didn't expect that to happen, but it did, and it was funny. But Kong takes Anne up to his mountain lair, where I don't know what you call it. I think it's a plesiosaur, plesiosaur, or something like that. That's the best I can describe it. It emerges from the bubbling swamp and tries to strangle Kong because Anne was screaming as soon as she saw it. Kong was I think picking a flower or something, and then he notices right behind him, and it starts another fight scene. But of course, Kong kills it as well because he's the king of this island. And then Kong inspects Anne in a pretty weird and awkward scene where he begins to caress her and tearing off her clothing and tickling her. And this is something that I'll mention later in special effects, because in the commentary they do talk about this scene and also in the documentaries as well about this being one of the censored scenes, along with some of King Kong's scenes where he killed people. But Jack interrupts what's going on by knocking over a boulder. And so when Kong leaves Anne to investigate the noise, a pteranodon swoops from the sky and clutches Anne in its talons. And then we have a final fight ensue, and the pteranodon is dispatched and is sent tumbling down the cliff face. And so this distracts Kong long enough for Jack to rescue Anne and take her back to the native village. And Kong, being the raged, horny gorilla he is not letting someone take his lady. So he chases them, breaks through the large door of the wall, and rampages through the village and killing many of the natives. I mean, like, holy shit, was this body count incredible. Dude, like, is freaking putting people in his mouth. He is stepping on people. It's fucking insane. King Kong is a savage. Like, he just doesn't give a fuck. Like, it's just so incredible, and that he, like, just, the body count in this movie is just amazing. But eventually it has to come to an end, and Denham hurls a gas bomb, knocking Kong out as soon as he gets to the beach, and then he, basically exults in the opportunity to take the gorilla back to New York. And he basically says this, which is one of Carl Denham's infamous lines.
He's always been king of his world, but we'll teach him fear. We're millionaires, boys. I'll share it with all of you. Why, in a few months it'll be up in lights on Broadway. Kong, the eighth wonder of the world!
So the next scene begins just how Denham said in his quote, with lights on a theater marquee with Kong, the eighth wonder of the world, on it. And along with hundreds of curious New Yorkers, Denham, Driscoll, and Anne are all wearing their evening wear for this event. And the curtains lift, and Denham presents a subdued and, chained up Kong to the stunned audiences, to show proof of their story on Skull Island. And pretty much everything goes well until the photographers use the blinding flashbulbs, with cameras associated back in the 30s, and they begin snapping shots of Anne and Jack, who is now her fiance, since now Jack and Anne are married, and Denham, invited them to the premiere. But under the impression that the flashbulbs are attacking Anne, Kong, being the horny gorilla he is, breaks free of his bonds and is able to escape the theater. And he rampages through the city streets, destroying a elevated train, killing several citizens, which was fucking insane. Like, I heard the scene was apparently not even going to be in the original cut, but I think because it was not long enough, I think they added the scene, and it shows just how savage King Kong is, like, again, with his body count. Like I said, dude doesn't give a fuck. He just, he literally just destroys this train, killing a lot of people inside. Even though I think he has Anne at this point and didn't need to do that, but more for the body count, I guess. I'm okay with Kong killing people, and I guess I proved myself wrong, because Kong actually does find Anne after that, which I think is when he had someone else, and well, he did drop a lady who he mistaken for Anne and just fucking killed her. But he eventually finds Anne, and he carries her to the top of the Empire State Building, which looks great in this film. And I think the Empire State Building was very new at the time, from what I understand. And so this is a really, nice shot. They actually did take shots of the Empire State Building when they were filming this, so it was really good and was a fantastic climax. And the military dispatches 4 biplanes to destroy Kong after, Jack pretty much suggested, because they can't get up there with, tanks or cars or anything like that, or on foot. So they have to take planes. And so the ape, noticing the planes, Kong, sets Anne down on the building's observation deck, and he climbs atop, the very peak of the building where the morning mass is, and he tries fending off the attackers, and he manages to swat one of the planes down, which goes tumbling right to the ground, so those fucking pilots are dead. But in the end, Kong is no match for these planes, and he is mortally wounded by a bunch of machine gun fire, and he plummets to his death in the street below. And what was cool, an interesting fact, which I'll mention later, is that Cooper and Shootsack uh, were the ones in the plane that shot Kong down and delivered the final kill. So I thought that was interesting, and I'll talk about that more when we get to the special features. But the Empire State Building scene was honestly one of the best scenes in the film, besides the log scene, and it was a really good and iconic climax to the film. So after that scene, Denham makes his way to the front of the crowd, and a cop, and him and a cop begin exchanging stuff, and this triggers not only one of the best closing lines uh, ever in a movie, but another one of Denham's best lines in the film, and it was honestly one of the best way. It was a fantastic way to end the movie, and this is what the cop and Denham say.
Well, Denham, the airplane's got him. Oh, no. It wasn't the airplanes. It was Beauty killed the beast.
So that's the end of the film, but before I, give my final thoughts on the movie itself, I want to touch on the special features as well in my review. And this is going to be a first, but it's definitely not going to be the last. I really do think it was good to get a DVD version, as I said earlier in the intro, of this movie. And I'm not gonna go into every little detail. I'm just gonna mention a few things that I found intriguing in all the special features. So to start out the special features, in the first disc you obviously got the film itself, which we talked about, but you also got the commentary of the film, which is done by visual effects veterans Ray Harryhausen and Ken Ralston. And there's also a bit of excerpts, little snippets of interviews with Marion C. Cooper and Fay Wray. because I believe this was done in 2005. So Cooper and Ray were both. Well, Cooper was definitely dead, but Ray, I think, she. If this was done like close to the film's release, Ray probably did die. I believe that was around the same time she had passed away. So, but there's a couple of things fascinating about the commentary. I'm not familiar with Ray Harryhausen or Ken Rolston as visual effects veterans, but it was nice to learn more about them, um, and what they thought about the film. And Harryhausen unfortunately passed away. I think in the 2010s, like early 2010s, not too long ago. So rest in peace to him, as well as Marion C. Cooper and Fay Wray. But I'm pretty sure Ken Rolston is still alive, as he sounded like a pretty young fellow when he was doing this commentary. But anyway, first thing I want to mention about the commentary was there was the first thing they mentioned was during the scene with Denham and Fay Wray in the diner. They were talking about how the characters and in the fantasy really help the movie. The characters help you believe in the fantasy part of the film. And I definitely agree with them on that, as I think that had the characters not been as likable, I don't think we would have been invested as much in the fantasy element, even if it was good. So having good characters with good fantastical characters and islands and shit like that and natives definitely helped this movie's legacy.
Overall concept of fantasy.
Yeah, I don't think the script gets the attention that a lot of this movie does with probably film students and stuff about how well written it is.
It is well written. It was well thought out. But it takes you by the hand from the Depression era into the most outrageous fantasy that you've ever seen on the screen. And you believe it.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you get to Skull Island, you believe what you're going to see. And that's an accomplishment these days.
Tremendous.
Because kids today, due to television, they've been brainwashed to want action right away, and this builds gradually.
You have to invest a lot of yourself in the characters before you get to the island. Otherwise, it's a meaningless exercise. You have to know who everyone is, what their motivations are, why they're going,
Yes.
and feel for them. Then once they're in this incredibly insane environment, you still feel grounded. You still feel, for me, that's why I believe it. I'm still hanging on to the characters running through this world. No matter what I'm saying, I'm still believing the guys who are taking me through this adventure.
Absolutely, yes.
If you notice in this thing, I got my love story going. The boy fell in love with the girl. You understood who Denham was. You understood the character of the captain. I got them all. So once you got that chase going, I never had to stop to explain a single damn thing, because you understood it. I spent not 15 minutes, I spent nearly 40 minutes explaining this. And this is why it's so bad on television. They cut most of that. You jump right into danger and you don't believe the thing.
Another thing they mention, they bring it up a few times in the commentary, but when I really didn't take note of it. They said it once, I think, in the beginning, but the second time is when I took note of it. And they talked about, I think it was during when when Denham and crew were getting ready to go on their first trip to the island, and they talk about how the music impacted the movie's legacy. And I do agree with them on that, as the music did help a lot with this movie, and there was a lot of good music and soundtrack in it. I obviously forget the man behind the music, but they mention him a lot in both the commentary and the documentary, and he was really vital to his music was really vital to this movie's success. And had the music not been as strong as it was, it may have not. The movie could have still been good, but it probably wouldn't be as iconic as it was without a lot of the soundtracks in it. So I definitely do agree with them on that. The next thing they mentioned was like how I mentioned earlier, when King Kong was taking off Anne's clothes on the top of the mountain. They mentioned how it was a censored scene, and they talked about, I think they mentioned it in the documentary as well, at I believe when this movie was re-released, not the original cut of the film when they released it in 33, but I think when it was re-released, Fay Ray's scene, where her clothes were off, and as well as a couple of kills, I believe mainly with the natives and how they were killed, were censored down because they thought it was too risque to show a female parts. Because, which kind of, I get why they would think that, but I don't know. I mean, I think it was fine, the original cut, and how it was, because you see Anne's clothes ripped off in the next scene, and so when they censored it, it really hindered it, and it looked weird. But thankfully, in this version, this is the original cut of the film, I believe. So this wasn't really censored. They put all the stuff back together, so we got to see Anne's, getting her clothes taken off, and the brutal kills of Kong with the natives. And then the final thing I wanted to touch upon was the ending scene. I mentioned earlier how during the Empire State Building scene that the pilots on the plane were Cooper and Shozak, and that was true. They did mention that, and they talk about it a lot in both the commentary and the documentary, and I really do love that the filmmakers decided, hey, we made Kong, might as well, be the ones to kill him. And that was a really cool mentality, because we got to see both of the men behind, the movie, be a vital piece to Kong's demise. And so it was definitely a really good scene in the commentary.
That's Cooper and Shozak in the plane.
I always thought it was so interesting that they're the ones who shoot him off the Empire State Building.
The only part I played, the pilot you see in the scene, that's me. That's the action pilot. I shot it out right where Lockheed Air Terminal. What do they call it now, where the Lockheed factory is? They used to call it Lockheed Air Terminal. And I shot it out there one day. And then I did a little of it in miniature, which I can tell readily what the audience has done yet. But most of that's real.
And also, the last thing on the first disc, besides the movie and the commentary, was all of Mary C. Cooper's movies, trailers. So there was a gallery of every movie that Mary C. Cooper was involved in, all the trailers for those movies in one gallery. So, not really much to say on that, but if you're a Mary C. Cooper fan and, you're interested in his other works, maybe the trailer gallery might, give you an idea of what you might be interested in. He mostly did a lot of, he did monster stuff in the 30s and like King Kong, and he did westerns in the 50s, which isn't surprising because that's what was big during that time period. And so we move on to the second disc, which is where a lot more of the special features are at. The first thing is that there's a documentary called I'm King Kong, The Exploits of Merian C. Cooper, which basically profiles the original King Kong's director, guiding hand. So if you want to know more about Merian C. Cooper, this documentary does a good job explaining, not just Merian C. Cooper's film work, but also his life before and after film. So it's a really good documentary, and, it gives a good insight into Merian C. Cooper as both a person and a filmmaker. And then we get a new 7-part documentary in the film, because, well, it was new when it was released, but it was a new 7-part documentary of, called RKO Production 601, The Making of Kong, the Eighth Wonder of the World. So each part goes into different aspects of the documentary, in the documentary. This documentary is loaded with stuff, and it's probably the one, if you're not interested in any of the other stuff, I think the 7-part documentary is definitely the one I would recommend out of all of them, because if you want to know every single aspect about Kong's creation, everything behind the scenes, this documentary does a good job detailing that. But I'll just mention a few things about the documentary that I found interesting. So, in part 3 of the documentary, the first thing I wanted to mention was they talk about Edgar Wallace's original script. I thought it was pretty interesting how that Edgar Wallace's script, a lot of it was incorporated into the final version, but he was never able to do a revision because unfortunately he had passed away before he could do a revision. And that's a shame, and because maybe I don't know if the film would have been the same had he done a revision, but who knows if we would have had a different film or not had he done the revision, or if he would have just, been let go. But I find it interesting that they used a lot of the elements from him, and they do credit him in the beginning of the film, so rest in peace to Edgar Wallace. And it is something interesting to note, because if you want to know about the original, a lot of the original ideas and what his original script was going to be, then this documentary details it in the third part.
In late 1931, British novelist Edgar Wallace had been brought in to write the first draft of Kong under the working title of The Beast. Wallace's efforts yielded a 110-page script. Although it was drastically different than the final film, many elements of Wallace's storyline remain.
Denham is on a totally different boat, and he is looking for animals for a live show, and they stop on the island just in time to throw the gas bombs and knock King Kong out, and then take him back to the city.
Wallace's cinematic sequence had Kong in New York, but chained up and on display in a circus. Kong manages to escape and hovers over the New York skyline, ultimately landing on the rooftop of the Empire State Building. Instead of biplanes attacking Kong, he would be struck down and killed by lightning. Before he could begin revisions to the script, Wallace fell ill and died on February 10, 1932, from complications due to pneumonia.
And so after that, we move into the fourth part of the documentary, which I believe has the most going on. It talks a lot about the visual effects, and I think the visual effects were probably some of the stuff I was interested in the most. I think the first thing that was really interesting about the visual effects in the fourth part of the documentary was the level of secrecy on the visual effects. They didn't want people to know that King Kong was going to, be the lead, or what he was going to look like. They didn't want people to know that it was going to be stop motion, probably because they didn't want to throw. People probably wouldn't see a stop motion character in theaters, because it would have been the first time a stop motion character was a main character. But it's interesting the level of secrecy they did. They lied about a lot of things to the public, and whenever that was reported on or if it was talked about. And so they kept everything on the down low, and there isn't really much. They didn't have any behind the scenes back then. There was no release of the film back then that has any behind the scenes stuff. So we're just left with people who were close to it and know a lot of stuff in the production, but we don't get any interviews with Cooper, Schoedsack, Willis O'Brien, the actors of the film, Fay Wray, Robert Armstrong, Bruce Cabot, all of them. But this was also another interesting scene in the documentary, just the level of secrecy on the visual effects.
Cooper and Schoedsack, when they were making King Kong, wanted a considerable degree of secrecy.
The production of King Kong was kept a complete mystery, especially in terms of the visual effects. They didn't want people walking into the theater thinking the eighth wonder of the world was 18 inches tall. The information that was released to the public was completely wrong.
Like a man in a gorilla suit crawling up the side of the building, Fay Wray being cut out and put in the hand frame by frame. None of these things were the way they actually did it. They not only didn't want people to know how the effects were done, but they also didn't allow any behind-the-scenes footage in the animation rooms.
I have never found an interview with Willis O'Brien, and I have tried very hard to find one. And how sad is that we don't have the ability to hear Willis's ideas about the inception of his craft and what his motivations were.
And then there's also other things in the fourth part of the documentary as well, such as there being 3 different King Kong puppets, which was also interesting. That there was different versions of King Kong, not just in the stop motion, but you also got, you know, the real life animatronic stuff that they built for the movie, like the hand, the foot, the face, all that shit. Another thing I found interesting in the fourth part of the documentary was when they talked about how much Willis O'Brien was giving King Kong some personality. I really didn't think much into that, but thinking back, you know, Kong does have a lot of personality in this film and how savage he is, and they do talk about how it's not so simple that the guy just, you know, that Willis O'Brien just animates the movements of a gorilla. He tries to think what Kong would be doing. He goes in the head of the character, and so I really think Willis O'Brien is to be credited as the actual actor of King Kong. And that's really cool, because a lot of his touches made King Kong what he was in the final film. And I give him credit for that. He really not only did a fantastic job visually, but he also did a good job, you know, acting-wise with the character, just putting a lot of his personality into what he would do if he was Kong and he was doing all of this stuff. You know, putting his mind into the mind of King Kong, which is really fascinating and interesting. And then the last thing I want to mention about the documentary is the 6th part of it. This 6th part is basically about the whole Lost Spider Pit sequence. So if you wanted to know more about that whole sequence, there's a whole part dedicated to that. But what was interesting about it was why the Spider Pit sequence was cut. And another thing interesting about it, the whole thing about it, was Peter Jackson, the director of the remake, the 2005 remake of King Kong. He was in the documentary, and he actually did a fun little project where he recreated the whole Spider Pit sequence. And it was like a passion project for him, and I applaud him for that. He didn't do this because he, you know, needed to. He did it because he wanted to, and he did it with other people who loved the original and did what they thought was the Spider Pit sequence. So I really love that, and you know, if you want a version of what the Spider Pit sequence might have been like, I think Peter Jackson's one is probably the closest we're going to get until they actually recover it, because who knows if it's still around. It most likely might have been perished by now. It could have been easily, you know, deleted or cut or thrown out, or burned. Who knows where it is. I mean, it could still be out there somewhere, but, you know, it's definitely not something to hold out on. So until that does happen, which from what I understand, I don't think I've heard anything of it, you know, happening. Peter Jackson's recreation is definitely the closest we're going to get. So if you're interested in the Spider Pit sequence in general, this is the documentary does a good job in the 6th part going through the whole thing. And then the last thing in the special features is the test footage of the scrapped movie Creation, which was kind of a predecessor of what King Kong was going to be. Creation was going to be the movie that Willis O'Brien worked on, and a lot of stuff in Creation was used in King Kong. So it's essentially an origin predecessor to King Kong. So if you want, and the commentary is done by Ray Harryhausen again, so rest in peace to him. And once again, this guy really loved King Kong and was a fan of all those old movies. But he goes into detail about Creation and talks about it, the test footage of it, because they made a few test footage before it got scrapped, and Cooper said, we're going to go with King Kong, which was a good idea, but it's nice to see what the movie could have been like. And they actually do, there is a part in the documentary, I think the 2nd part, during the origins of King Kong, where they talk about the story of Creation and what it would have been like. So if you're interested in what Creation would have been like, The second part of the documentary goes in it, and if you want to see actual test footage of it and Ray Harryhausen commentating it, there's also his it's in the special features as well. It's in the same section, I believe, as the documentary. But that's everything on the King Kong special features. So let's get into my final thoughts on the film. So here we go. I'm going to give the 1933 King Kong film 5 stars out of 5. Normally with, my positive reviews, I would start with the negatives and then go on with the positives. But, and this is a first, I think, I have no negatives for this film. Really, I tried to dig deep into what I thought might be a negative of this film. I mean, there's a plot hole on the log, but that's not really a big of a negative because I know what they were intending to do with that scene. So, and while the fights aren't perfect, they're still really fantastic. So there's really just nothing I can say negatively about this film because this film is just so great at everything it does. I just can't find any really not even any minor or even major negatives for it. Those two things I mentioned earlier are probably the closest to it. So let's just go on with the positives, and I have a few of them. I think we'll start off with the story of the original King Kong. It's really great. I'm really invested in this story, and a lot of that has to do with both the characters and King Kong himself. Had the characters and King Kong not been as strong as they were, this adventure would have not, this story wouldn't have worked so well. But just the idea of this filmmaker, this ambitious filmmaker who wants to get back on the map after, only doing nature films and trying to go all out and do something big, and he finds a legendary monster on an island, a very unknown island, and brings him back to New York, and King Kong does all this damage. But also just the Beauty and the Beast aspect is really cool. This monster that's fascinated with this female. Most monsters don't tend to really give humans any second thought. Like with Godzilla doesn't give a shit about the humans. Godzilla just destroys cities, fights the monsters. Godzilla's primary objective is to protect the Earth. The Earth matters more than the humans. But I can get why, because that makes sense. And it works for Godzilla. For King Kong, he's the opposite. He does protect the Earth. In later films, he does protect the Earth if you want to go in the MonsterVerse aspect. But in this original film, he's kind of just not only protecting his island, but he's fascinated by this woman. And you realize that it's not every woman that he's fascinated with. He's fascinated about something with Anne, and it's not explained why, but it most likely is just it's maybe something to do with her looks or her personality. But King Kong just loves her, and that the fact that his love is ultimately his downfall really is a great story, and it makes it strong. So I really love how the story progressed and was done. Speaking of the characters, all of them are great. I'll go into the main ones since those are really the only ones I care about. But we'll talk about the main 3. My favorite is Carl Denham. Robert Armstrong's portrayal of Carl Denham is obviously the best thing in the film. And in the documentaries and in the commentary, they talk about how Robert Armstrong was cast as Denham because with Denham, they were trying to, portray Denham like what Merian C. Cooper was in real life. He was enthusiastic. He wanted to get the picture. He always faced danger. He didn't care. He wanted to make an authentic and good film. And that's really incredible. Despite Denham's flaws, I really love his character. He's supposed to be the antagonist, but he doesn't feel like one. He really doesn't. In later films, he does, especially in the 05 remake and any other. But in the original, despite people saying that Denham is a villainous guy, I kind of think the opposite. He does do like a lot of shitty things, but he's not really a shitty person in my eyes. I think Denham is a really, flawed but lovable character. And I'll probably get into that in the next film, as that's where a lot of people, shit on Denham and, shit on that film for, trying to feel sympathy for Denham. Denham did some poor things. The only major poor thing he did was bringing Kong back to New York. The stuff with the natives and all that was not Denham's fault. Okay, I know people say that Denham got, the natives killed and he intruded on their land, but think about it. Denham is supposed to be this enthusiastic filmmaker. When you realize that real life filmmakers back in the day used to do that, especially with Marion C. Cooper, it's not exactly really a bad thing. Denham wants to shoot a really authentic film and wants to catch the legend, first one to catch the legend. And that's what I like about Denham. He's a flawed character, but his enthusiasm as a filmmaker makes him lovable. And when push comes to shove, despite him, he doesn't, just put down the camera and record every second like in the 2005 remake. He does record, but when his men are attacked, he runs away. He tries to help them, and when he brought Kong back, he wasn't doing it just for himself. He was doing it for everybody. He said he was going to share it with all of them. He didn't say it was going to be all for himself. He wasn't being greedy. He was being a little bit greedy, but I think had Kong not come to the beach, Denham wouldn't have captured Kong. It's really Kong's own undoing that brought him to New York. But Denham did bring him back, which is a bad thing. But I just really think Robert Armstrong did a fantastic job of Carl Denham's character. And that's like a little tangent about Denham, because I understand Denham is a flawed and, does a character and does a lot of shitty things, but I really don't see him as an antagonistic character. In fact, I think really the later movies portray him more as antagonistic, whereas in the original, I don't think he was meant to be portrayed that way. He's just the guy that made a huge mistake of bringing Kong back to New York. But the next film, kind of tackles that a bit better. But Carl Denham was fantastic. I really was invested in his character. Any scene with him, fantastic. I was automatically in. Now let's talk about the other two. So we got Jack Driscoll, and Jack was fine. He starts out as kind of like a hard, stone cold type of dude, from what I understand, I think he was based on Shootzak. So there is that aspect, but I don't think basically I don't think he's the same as exact same as Shootzak, but it was just based on him. And I like how it progresses where he has feelings for Anne, and they're not forced. They don't force the feelings on Anne. They don't try to say because she's the only female that Jack just automatically loves her for no reason. I think Jack just is fascinated about certain things about Anne and begins to develop those feelings naturally, and it's really good. Now, I don't necessarily consider Jack to be an amazing character. He's fine for what he is, but I do commit his bravery throughout the film of going against Kong. So Bruce Cabot did a good job with what he was working with, but honestly I think Jack, when it comes to the trio, probably is the less interesting of the three. And then you got Ann Darrow, who's the female lead, and she's also good. I really like how she's just this down on her luck actress, because this film, obviously, when it was shot during the time, was during the Great Depression. So this was a hard time for a lot of people. So it really delves into that, where she's, she's in a bad place, and she doesn't, and like I said, she was reluctant to go to Skull Island. But she really had no choice because there's not much options left. You get a lot of money by acting. This could be like a big break for her. And so she sees that opportunity, takes it, and she goes on this adventure and is loved by both Jack and Kong. And I assume it's like this, kind of naivety, but also, just this, not trying to get in the way. She's just a sweet type of woman who's just trying to, earn a living, taking your, trying to find some good, get her life back together in this tough time. So that's really great about Anne's character, is the struggle she goes through and why she does what she does. So I think, and then of course you got Capital Englehorn as well, who I really like how he was like Denham's, pal, and did a lot of things with Denham, and could speak the native language, and all that. He was really he was a good pal to Denham. I think he was a good character that wise. And then you got obviously King Kong himself. The monsters are all good. They all look good. They all fight well. I'm really invested in the battles. King Kong is obviously the real star of the show, and he looks great in the film. Like I said, I just love how fucking savage he was throughout this movie. He did not give a single fuck about anybody on this island. He just killed them. If he lost Anne, he would go on this angry, horny rage to go find her. He killed anybody that was around. Like, he did, just how savage he was in this film was incredible. I just love how the way he killed people and other monsters. Like I said, that personality that Willis O'Brien gave really, helps with the film. And obviously, like I said, Willis O'Brien not only did well, by giving Kong a personality acting-wise, but he also did a good job visually of making Kong look good. I mean, he kind of looks a little bit goofy with the animatronic when they do a close-up, but he's fine, that he is what he is. He's got that dumb smile, but that's the beauty of Kong. He looks ugly sometimes, but he looks good. That's all that matters. He looks good for what he is. Willis O'Brien did a fantastic job. It's one of the best, looking Kongs I've seen. And I think the action of the film is really good. You got the action between, the monsters on Skull Island, and you got the action between the humans and Kong in New York. And it was incredible and engaging, but it could also be funny and entertaining sometimes. Like I said, when the sailors fucking died and went down in the ravine off the log, it was fucking hilarious. Not just the way they screamed, but how savage Kong was. He was just one by one flailing them like a bunch of rag dolls, and it was incredible. But it was just really good. And then you got the Empire State Building showdown, which is honestly one of the best climaxes in the film. It just was really good to end the film on, having Kong come back to New York and go on a national landmark in New York City like the Empire State Building, especially when it was new. And and have a battle there. It was really cool and fascinating, and it was just that's what I loved about the film, the climax of it, and just how it kept building, and how savage Kong was throughout the whole entire movie. I know I keep saying that, but he was. But everything was just on point. The action, the story, the characters, it was all good. There wasn't any single thing that was wrong with it. Everything was filled right. The story was natural. It all fitted well together. It was fun. It was entertaining. I was invested in it the whole way. The characters made me interested in the story because they were all good. They were believable. I understood where they were coming from. They all, filled their roles perfectly. And the action was both engaging and, funny at the same time. But that was the beauty of it. So overall, I would recommend this film. King Kong fans are certainly right. I would recommend this film to both fans and newcomers of the show, of the movie. If you King Kong fans are, like I said, King Kong fans are definitely right. This film is fantastic. It's a masterpiece in every way. There's really nothing wrong with this film. I mean, if you're a newcomer and you've heard about Kong but you're apprehensive, I think you should give King Kong a chance. It may surprise you, and it's definitely a classic that's worth watching. So, and it's just there's really not much you could say about it because it just did everything well, and I applaud Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schutzack for their work on this film. And Willis O'Brien and all of them. They just did everything well. It was a fantastic film through and through. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the film. Do you love the film? Like most King Kong fans and myself. Do you hate the film? I would actually be interested to hear somebody who doesn't like the original film and tell me why you maybe don't like the film. That'd be interesting. Or are you somewhere in the middle with the film, where you don't think it's good, but you don't think it's bad either? That would also be a bit interesting. So I'm curious for your thoughts. So make sure to leave it in the comments and let me know. And subscribe for more King Kong content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content. I have more King Kong content coming possibly next month or this month. We'll see how much I can get done, but throughout the summer special, I'm going to try and get as many King Kong films as I can. Hopefully I'll at least get the original duology reviewed. And, there's also, I already have King Kong vs. Godzilla up. So if you're interested in my thoughts on that film as well, you're more welcome to do so. So I've talked about King Kong before, so there's plenty more King Kong content coming. And if you want, you can also follow me on Facebook, where I have polls for future videos, updates for both my channels, and where we have discussions on both of the things we talk about. Things we talk about on both my channels. And I also have Twitch, where I hope to live stream in the future. So in my next video, I'm going to be continuing the summer special with a review of Season 1, Episode 2 of Treadstone. So if you saw my Episode 1 review and you're interested on my thoughts on Episode 2, stay tuned. I'll have that, worked on and eventually. Hopefully maybe by the end of this month or next month, but either way, stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, peace out.